Dear students, good morning to all of you. Today we'll start the new topic, that is the deficient demand. I hope you must be clear about the meaning of excess demand and effects of the excess demand and measures to correct the excess demand. Now we'll start the deficient demands. What do we know deficient demands? We have already known the situation of the full employment situations, that is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. This is that aggregate supply which is equal to consumption plus saving, and this is called that aggregate demand which is equal to consumption plus investments, and this is that full employment situations. OM level of the full employment situations is the demands. Before we discuss the deficient demand, we must know that this situation is that y-axis and y-axis. Y-axis represents the output and income, and y-axis represents the consumption, investment and saving. Also that is that aggregate demand and aggregate supply and consumption and trading. So this is the full employment situations. Employment is this much and income is this much. At that time these are situations. These are situations where AD equal to AX. That is consumption plus investment equal to consumption plus saving, and investment equal to saving. This is that E situations imply that. So we'll discuss the deficient demand. What do you mean demand of deficiency? It means the demand will be less. Deficient demand means first of all the demand will be less. As we are discussing that macroeconomics, in macroeconomics deficient demand means the country's demand will be less. Country's demand will be less, not that individual demand, because macro analysis deals with that as a whole of an economy, that is aggregate. So that is the aggregate demand, aggregate supply. It means that aggregate demand of a country will be less. That is called the deficient demand. So far the deficient demand is concerned, if I will draw that line, this is called AD dash. I draw the line, that is the AD dash. So in this case, AD dash case, देखिए, that G is a point, this point. OM level of output cases, G is a point, AD dash, that means consumption plus investments plus delta. This situation is the delta, but delta I is reducing. Previously we are discussing delta I is increasing above that AD dash. Now it is that below of AD dash, below of AD dash. So this is that employment situations, a full employment situation. But this AD dash intersect to these points. That may be that E dash, E dash. So at this full employment situations, E, and that demand is now that MG, full employment situations, MG, ME, but when that delta 80 days case में mg is the demand. Full employment case में aggregate demand, that is the timing. Now that demand is this much, how much is less? Eg is less. Eg is less. So how much is less? Less is Eg. So Eg is less. That is to be called, this situation is to be called that deficient demand. This is called deficient demand. So what do we mean deficient demand? Note it. Aggregate demand is for a level of output. Aggregate demand is for a level of output less than the full employments. This is the full employments, or this aggregate demand less than the full employment. This gap is to be known as the deficient demands, or it is to be known as the deflationary gap, or it is to be known as deflationary gap. So, deficient demand refers to a situation wherein planned aggregate expenditure in the economy falls. Planned aggregate expenditure in the economy falls short of aggregate supply of goods and services at the full employment situations. In case of excess demand, what we are discussing, the aggregate demand is more than that of aggregate supply at the level of full employment. That is to be called that excess demand. Aggregate demand is more than that of aggregate supply at the level of full employment is known as the excess demand. Here is that just reverse. Aggregate demand is less. Aggregate demand is less than that of aggregate supply at the level of full employment is to be known as that deficient demands. That time I was told to you, एक तीर में दो शिकार करना है. If you are clear about the excess demand, just reverse the deficient demands. So that is what is deficient demands? When aggregate demand is less than that of aggregate supply at the level of full employment, then that is to be called the deficient demand. Now it is clear what do you mean deficient demands? Again I repeat. As per a book language, aggregate demand is for a level of output less than. Aggregate demand is for a level of output less than that full employment level, then that situation of deficient demand exists. So deficient demand give rise to a deflationary gap which causes the economy's income, output, employment to decline, thus pushing the economy into that underemployment equilibrium. So whenever I draw it AD dash, that time it intersect to that aggregate supply these points E1. So in this case E1 and M1 is the situations. E1 and M1 is the situation. This point is E1. E1 M1 situations, which is that AD equal to S or AD dash equal to S. So now to reach this equilibrium, we have to shift towards the left from E to E1 and M to M1. It means E1 is the equilibrium situations where to get these situations, what we have to reduce? Output has to reduce. Output has to reduce. Employment has to reduce. It means people demand is less. So price of the goods will be less. These are the effects. These are the effects. So again I repeat, when this deficit demand occurs or the deflationary gap occurs, what will the consequences? In excess demand cases, the price rise. Here is the price falls. It means what is the excess demand case? Purchasing power was increasing, price of the goods was increasing, but in this case, price will fall. Why the price will fall? Because when the demand is less, here the deficient demand is less, or how much is that EM previously, due to that change in investment, now this much is at this point and we have to reach this point. That is why output is reducing, employment is reducing. When there is no income of the people, they will demand the less and less commodities, and ultimately price will be reduced because there will be no employment. That is why the price will rise. So what deficient demand says that what that aggregate demand requires to the maintain the full employment minus that current aggregate demands, or deficient demand says that available aggregate output minus anticipated aggregated expenditure. Available aggregate output, available aggregate output minus anticipated aggregated expenditure. Anticipated aggregate expenditure is equal to deficient demand. Available aggregate outputs, ME, that is in my diagram, ME. Anticipated aggregate expenditure, MG. So what will remain? EG. That is EG is the deficient demand. So after analyzing the deficient demand, now it is clear the excess of available output over that anticipated expenditure is called that deficient demands. Again I repeat, the excess of available output anticipated expenditure is called deficient demands. Available output is OM, or we may that this is that consumption and investment as well as that consumption of slabbing, aggregate supply. So in this case we may say that the excess of available output over anticipated expenditures, this much at the level of full employment, then this gap is to be called that deficient demand or the deflationary gap. So deficient demand gives rise to a deflationary gap which causes the economy output decreases, employment decreases, or this pushing that economy to an underemployment situations. So this is that underemployment situations. It pushes to that economy toward that underemployment equilibrium situations. It means this situation I may say that underemployment equilibrium situations. To reach this situation, the employment will reduce, so that the economic condition will be, what are these? Income reduces, output reduces, employment reduces. Output reduces, employment reduces, or income also reduces. That is that E1 is that underemployment situations, because previously this situations. So from this situation to this situations will reach the equilibrium. So that time, what are the steps we have to require to reach this equilibrium? Before this, we have to discuss that effects of deficient demands, effects of excess demands, deficient demands, effects of deficient demand, effects of deficient demand. What are the effects? Before we discuss the effects of deficient demands, I want to say that effects of excess demands. See it, the comparisons. Effects of excess demand and effects of deficient demand. We have already known first effects of the excess demand. What are these points? Price rise. It means the consistent or the continuous price rise. Continuous price rise or persistent price rise. Okay. Second point I was discussing, when there will the price rise, then there will be abnormal profits. Who will get that abnormal profit or supernormal profits? Producer will get that abnormal profits. Who will get it? Producer. Because if the price rises, the producer will sell that more and more output, so that the producer will get that more and more profits, so that abnormal profit will be accrued. When the producer will get that more and more profits, the consumer, whenever they will purchase, they will suffer the loss. Consequence or effects. Consumers will suffer the loss. Because the consumers' purchasing power will be reduced, they will purchase that goods at the higher prices, so that they are not able to purchase that more and more units of goods. That is why they will suffer the loss. So who will suffer the loss? Consumer will suffer the loss and producer will get the profit. So whenever the price will rise in excess demand, I am discussing about the effects of excess demand, what was discussing in the last topic. So the fourth points, which was the most important point I was discussing, that is that wage price spiral. Wage price spiral. What do we mean wage price spiral? I have already said. It means when the price rises, if the several goods price rise, then the consumers, they are unable to purchase that goods, so they will demand to increase their salaries. Where they will demand? Because you have all known there is that trade union, so they will demand in front of the trade unions or the unions that we are unable to survive, so that DA will increase. That means that price increases, they will demand to increase their wages and salaries. When that salary will increase, at that time, what will do that employer? They will increase that cost of productions. So when the cost of production will increase, again the price will increase. This circle is to be known as the wage price spiral. And if there is a full employment in the economy, production cannot be increased, because economy passes to the different stages that I will discuss here. That boom conditions, recession conditions, recovery conditions, like the depression conditions. So in this case, that economy will reach the condition of that prosperity in the trade cycle of the economy. These are the 5-6 points I was discussing, 5 or 6 points, that is the boost of the economy. So similarly, just reverse, continuous price rise, here that effect will be that fall in the price. Just reverse, I was telling at that time, if you are clear about that effects of demand, you should not be fall into any kinds of problems in the deficient demands. So there is that fall in the general price levels, Secondly, when that price will fall in excess demand, producer are getting that abnormal profits. Here the producer will get the loss. Producer will get the loss. The producer will be loser. There is a fall in the level of the production as they are already produced the goods. So the goods will not be sold, or that goods will be unsold in the market, so that the producer will be lost. Because the producer is already produced the product in the market and they are ready to sell in the market, but due to that fall in the price, producer will not sell the product in the market, and that goods, part of the production of goods will be unsold, so that the producer will suffer that loss. Again, third point, in case of the excess demand, the consumer will suffer the loss, but due to that fall in the price of the products, who will get that? Who will be gainer? Consumer will be gainer. Consumer will be the gainer. If the price will be less, general price will be less, or consumers will purchase the goods at the less prices, so that the consumer will be the gainer. And fourth point, we have written that wage price spiral. It means that employee, they will demand to rise in the salaries in front of the union, so employer will price rise. As a result of that will increase that cost of productions. So in this case, production increase, cost of production increase, and also price increases. So that is called the wage price spiral. But here is the just reverse. If price is less, producer is suffering the loss, consumer is the gainer, and people have no purchasing power. That is why they are not demanding the goods. As a result of most important factor, what is the OM income, that is reduced to OM1, it means that income of an economy will be reduced. Income reduced, or national income will be reduced. OM to OM1. OM1 is less than OM. OM1 is less than OM, so the national income or the output will be reduced. It is a very crucial system. So every economy, they don't want to that depression, rather they prefer to that inflation. So that is why one economist say inflation is worse, but it is better than deflation. Because in deflation case, income will be reduced, output will be reduced, unemployment or employment will be reduced. So this is the harmful for an economy. So real economy, they want to that inflation, but it is just 3% to 5%, not more than that. That is why inflation is better than deflation, or inflation is worst, but it is better than deflation. So when that national income will be decrease or fall, naturally fall in the level of employment, which leads to strikes and lockouts. Here is the demand for that increasing the wage more and more. Here when that income will reduce, producer will try to reduce that employment. Producer try to remove the employment facilities. Producer will start to reduce that employment, so that it creates again indiscipline in the factories or in the organizations. As a result of it leads to strikes and lockouts. तो इकोनॉमिक्स कितना खराब हो जाता है, economics will be so downfall that people will not get that employment, people have no wages and salaries, there is no production, so economy will go to downward, that is the depression situations. So if income decreases or national income decreases, employment decreases, then it leads to strikes and lockout. If there is the oligopoly in the economy, the price commodity will remain the same, but the level of production will decline. So it will lead to recession of the economy. Excess demand increases, the more demand, that is the worst, and this leads to recession of the economy. What is the recession of the economy? That is trade cycle. There is the trade cycles. What trade cycles? Now I will clear the situation of deficient demand and excess demand with regard to the trade cycles. What trade cycle says? Sit. This is the time period, and y-axis is the time periods. It means year to year, the January, February, March, April, May, June, year after year. And suppose y-axis represents the output. And suppose in the case of excess demand, there will be inflation, that is, then it starts to decline, then it reaches the lowest points, then again it will start like this, or it increases again. इस तरीके से जो सिचुएशन पास होता है, this is to be called the trade cycles. बिजनेस हो जाता है. So it means first when there is the excess demands, then this situation when it reaches the top, this is called the boom. And okay, when deficient demand starts, then that is to be called the recessions. This situation is to be known as the CSSI1 recessions. And at last it reaches this stage, this is called the depression. Again it starts to increase by the excess demand, then this situation is to be called the recovery. And again these situations, it is to be called the boom. These cycles is to be known as the trade cycles. It means excess demand generates the inflationary pressures, which is often referred to as the state of boom in the theory of trade cycles. Clear my points? When excess, suppose this is the R points, it started like this increase. This is in case of the excess demand, and it reaches to boom points, highest to top point. And when again depression starts, at that time the production is less, income is less, or output is less. So fall in the demand leads to the situation of deflations. So constant fall in the demand leads to the state of economy at that end of situations. This is called the depressions. Again, when starts in the economy, excess demand, it means that market will recovery. So that stage is to be called the recovery. Then it is the boom. This type of circles is to be known as the trade cycles. Or when there is the boom situations, this is to be called the full employment. This is called the full employment. That means boom occurs due to the excess demand. Depreciation occurs or depression occurs due to the deficient demands. So when steps are taken to control the economic process through these situations, then the stage of recession comes. If the recession is not controlled, it ultimately leads to the depression in the economy. When the steps taken by the government to control the depression, then the economy passes through the stages of recovery, which ultimately leads to the boom in the economy. These are the different stages: boom, recession, depression, recovery. Boom, recession, depression, recovery. Four stages. First stage, boom. Second stage, recession. Third stage, depression. Fourth stage, recovery. These are four stages, which is to be called the trade cycle. These are the four stages of the trade cycles. So, whenever we are discussing that deficient of demand, so it leads to the recessions and depression in the trade cycle of an economy. It means when there are depressions, it starts to decrease in the production, start decreasing the income, start decreasing the output, start decreasing the unemployment. So it reaches to the stage depression. So again, whenever it starts that excess demand, then in this situation again it is to be recover of the recession stage, that is called the recovery. Then it is reaches that boom, which is to be called the full employment. So these are the stages. So it leads to recession and depression in the trade cycle of an economy. Now the last point what I was discussing, where it is the boom in that excess demand, but in the deficient demand it is the depreciation. These are the four stages of trade cycle. Now we are clear about the excess demands and deficient demands, meaning and effects. Meaning and effects. So tomorrow we will start again the measures to correct the deficient demands. I am repeating because if you are clear in the excess demand, same points will be discussed. So it will be repeated for yourself more and more vividly to go clear, or no doubt one question you will get in the board exam. Thank you.